A man in the Appalachian Mountains shot a deer and it stood back up. No, seriously. I mean, like, it stood up on two legs. Story time. Welcome back, gang. I'm Cube of Lore to be exact, and this is Forbidden Lore Season 2, Appalachian Mountains. Y'all already read the title, so you know what this video is about. So if you don't have time to watch this video, just save, follow, and come back later, because y'all know I hate a long intro. Marcus was 32 years old, and he grew up around hunting his whole entire life. And he knew those Appalachian woods better than most. Like he knew it more than people knew their own neighborhood. So this guy wasn't some tourist. Marcus had a respect for the mountains. And Appalachian people will tell you right now, those woods, they have rules. Don't whistle at night. Don't follow voices. And if an animal starts acting human, leave immediately. Get up out of there. Now, one October evening, Marcus was deep in the woods near the mountains, just hunting alone. He was trying to make sure he got out there before the winter season kicked in. The sun was starting to disappear, fog rolling between the trees. Everything was normal at first, until he noticed a deer standing completely still between the trees, not eating, not moving, just kind of staring at him. Marcus said something felt wrong instantly. His eyes looked way too focused, way too aware, but he just brushed it off. He raised his rifle and fired. The deer dropped behind a bush. Marcus walks towards it, thinking the hunt is over, but when it gets closer, and he realizes he doesn't see like blood anywhere, nobody, nothing has what? Then no deer body either, just nothing. Then he hears movement behind him. Marcus turns around and the deer is standing there again. What? Except this time, it's only standing on two legs. Marcus said his front legs were hanging oddly and dangling from its chest, almost like the front legs forgot how to walk. Then he said its head tilted slowly at him. Then it spoke, not clearly, not perfectly, but just enough. It said, Marcus. And that's when he ran. And I don't blame him. I would have been calling me a track star. I would have been out of there. He's a runner. He's a track star. No, serious gang, ain't no way. Marcus was actually there too long. I don't care if he's from the mountains or not. Y'all not about to have me on the local news. The cause of death would be not minding my business. Yeah, not me. All right, back to the story. So Marcus said branches behind the tree were snapping, heavy footsteps moving way too fast, just rushing through the woods. Marcus said whatever was chasing him wasn't running like an animal anymore. It almost sounded like a person trying to intimidate him, he said. He finally reaches his truck, jumps inside, locks the doors, and before pulling off, he looks back towards the tree line one more time. And that deer thing was standing there again, but this time back on all fours, perfectly still, watching him. Marcus said he never hunted in that area again, and according to him, sometimes late at night, he still hears something outside his house, walking slowly through the trees. Appalachian people have been saying if an animal starts acting like a human, it was never an animal to begin with. I'm Cube of Lore. This is Forbidden Lore Season 2, Appalachian Mountain. If you like content like this, you want to stay on this side of the algorithm, don't forget to engage with the bottom up. Y'all already know, repost, save, comment, like. And if you're new here, of course, follow me. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. Follow me across all social platforms. Cube Oxley. It's the same name as this page. Easy to find. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. There's one thing about the Appalachian Mountain. They're nothing to be played with. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. And as always, it's only for entertainment purposes. So all legend hypothetically speak. Don't forget to let me know what you think in the comments. Yeah, and then just call me back later. Peace. Ashe.
I decided that tonight you were gonna have nightmares with me, so let's get into it. Have y'all ever heard of Stardust Ranch in Arizona? Well, in the middle of Rainbow Alley sits a 10-acre ranch where some peculiar things have happened over the years. Paranormal activity that is so intense and so direct you cannot question it. And even alien encounters that Hollywood writers could not make up if they tried. Well, the story that I am bringing to you today comes from someone who grew up a street over from Stardust Ranch. So they saw some stuff. So let's travel back to one weekend in July when this person was around 9 years old and they had a friend stay the night over at their house. Well, it's like the middle of the night and they're like, hey, what if we went to our neighbor's house, the neighbor that's closer to Stardust Ranch, and we played a little prank? And the friend's like, yes, we're gonna do that. We are gonna do that, absolutely. So they wait till around 1 in the morning, open up the window in the bedroom, crawl out, and go next door to their neighbor's house with like some soap because they're gonna make their outdoor fountain soapy. That was their trick. So pretty soon after they get to this neighbor's house, they notice that over at Stardust Ranch, there is a light floating above one of the fields. And they're like, we gotta see what that is. So they put down their soap and they go get a closer look at Stardust Ranch. So as they get closer, some details start popping out. It was spherical and a whitish yellow color, and it was hovering over the field. But that light became not really the most interesting part once they got closer and noticed that there was something walking around underneath it. It looked like a very sickly man with a giant head, and he was just kind of staggering around, zigzaggy pattern, like it didn't make sense. It was really strange the way he was moving around. Now he was zigzagging the opposite way from the friends, so they were like, okay, we're safe to turn our backs to get back to our house and walk away. They get around halfway back to the house before they turn around and look and see that that light is coming towards them. Now it's not like buzzing at them, but it's steady coming their way, and it wasn't doing that before. They get home, leap back into their window, close it really fast, close the curtain, scurry to the opposite side of the room, and hold each other as they watch this light get closer from the curtain. And then when it gets really close, it just kind of stays there and hovers and watches them. The next morning, they realize they left the soap over at that fountain, so they return to the scene of everything and notice that there is a man walking around the ranch, probably the owner, on his phone talking really frantically, but they can't understand what he's saying. Her friend goes home, tells her mom what happens, and is forbidden to ever go to that ranch again. I'm pretty sure she was forbidden to be around that friend again.
She ran blindly in the direction of the train station in search of someone who could help her. But instead, she went on to become one of Harper's Ferry, West Virginia's most enduring ghost stories. Now, I'm talking about Screaming Jenny. Now, this happened just outside of Harper's Ferry in the mid-1800s. And it was near the train station for the B&O Railroad at the time. You see, after the railroad popped up there were a bunch of sheds that were used for storage of materials that they needed when the railroad was first being constructed and everything. But it wasn't long before those sheds were all emptied out and abandoned. Well, the poorer people among the community there had taken to using those sheds to live in, as shelter to stay out of the elements, especially in the colder months. And Jenny was one of those poor people. She lived alone. She didn't have any family. And she just had to pick up whatever odd jobs she could, just to get by, just to make ends meet. And this was late fall. And she was said to be really kind-hearted, though. Now, even though Jenny didn't have much, she was the first one to help someone when they were sick, or if someone was hungry, she was known to go without, to make sure that they had something to eat. And she said that she was always in good spirits, too. She always had a positive, attitude. So one night, Jenny was sitting by her little fire and eating a bowl of broth. That's all she had was a bowl of broth, and just trying to stay warm. Well, a spark, an ember, had flown from her fire, and it landed on her woolen skirt. And it caught. Jenny didn't notice at first. She didn't notice until it was fully involved, until the woolen skirt was fully involved in a flame and it touched her skin. That's when she noticed that there was a problem. Of course, she dumped her whole bowl of broth all over it, in an attempt to get it to go out, and that wasn't enough. It was already fully ablaze, guys. So in a panic, she runs out of the shed and onto the tracks in the direction of the train station to try to get some help. It wasn't very far at all. So as she ran, the bigger the fire got, and it spread to her entire outfit. And it just was a matter of moments before she was fully engulfed in flames. and she was blinded, And it said that Jenny was screaming, just wailing in pain, just running down the tracks, fully ablaze, and just this god awful wailing scream in pain and agony. And she didn't notice the train coming around the curve. The light, she didn't notice the light from the train, the horn, or the sound of the screeching brakes. And none of that was enough anyway. The engineer was not able to stop in time, and sadly, Jeannie passed. Well, all the commotion, all the train whistle and everything had definitely got the attention of the people at the station. So it wasn't just a matter of minutes before there were several people there. They got her put out and they carried her on down to the station, and they ended up giving her a pauper's grave, a pauper's funeral, where she was buried in the local churchyard in an unmarked grave. And largely, the incident was forgotten about. It wasn't just a matter of days before another poor family had moved into Jeannie's shed, the shed that she had been occupying. And the incident was forgotten until about a month later. And that's when there was another engineer coming around the curve, and he was confronted with a flaming humanoid figure on the tracks. Of course, he repeated the whole incident. He locked down the brakes, laid on the horn, and it was too late. Again, he wound up hitting this humanoid flaming figure on the tracks. So he comes running down the tracks to check on it, and there's nothing there. No one there, no sign of anything being there. Of course, he's rattled. He goes to the station, the nearby station, and he reports the incident to the station master. And that's when they realize it was a month to the day from when the original incident with Jenny had happened. So that's where the story of Screaming Jenny was born. And it said that many an engineer have reported similar incidents, seeing Jenny on the tracks and hearing Jenny's wails. And it said to this day that Jenny is seen and heard on the tracks on the anniversary of her passing. So if you're walking along the B&O tracks in late fall and you hear a scream, a wail, or you see a flaming figure on the tracks, you have met Screaming Jenny. But that's been Jay's Haunted Appalachia for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed the story of Screaming Jenny. Keep sending me those stories and suggestions, and keep Appalachia haunted, y'all.
I got a confession. When I'm alone in the hall in the middle of the shift, in the back of my neck, I get a tingling and chill telling me something creepy is happening, and that's when I realize it's story time. All right, so this story though, it comes from a viewer, and she said, "Baby, I will never work home health care again. You could not pay me to do it again." She said she took a case down in Louisiana, and the moment that she pulled up, it felt a little bit off. She said that it felt dead, not quiet, but still, like the air itself didn't want to move. But she said if you've been in Louisiana before, you know that some places just kind of feel like that. So she brushed it off. She went inside, she got reports, she did her little walkthrough, and nothing seemed out of place until she seen this portrait in the hallway. You know, the kind that gives you the creeps where it feels like the eyes are following you? Yeah, that one. And she ignores it and she goes into the patient's room, which is a 98-year-old woman, failure to thrive at her end stage of dementia. And in the corner of the room, there is this old vintage armoire, tall and heavy, with like a scratch on the mirror. It wasn't cracked. It looked like maybe it was something from the inside caused it. She didn't like it, but she didn't question it. And the first night was going fine until about 2:35 in the morning, and she's in the living room reading, and then she hears crying, soft, broken, and she freezes. And as she's listening, she realizes it's coming from her patient's room. So she gets up, she goes in there, and the crying stops instantly. It is dead silent. Now, the patient is laying there, eyes wide open, tears running down her face, but she's not making any noise. So she just assumes that maybe that was the patient making that noise. She gives her some pain meds, she fluffs and buffs her so she gets her cleaned up and comfortable, and she goes back into the living room and she doesn't think anything much of it. That shift ends. But that second night, oh, that's when things took a turn. She said when she came in, the day shift caregiver had told her that she thought that the patient may not pull through the night. She had that death rattle and the look. So she prepared herself, and at 1 a.m., the crying starts again. But this time it's louder, more desperate. It sounds panicked. So she fastly walks to the back. She pushes open the door, and the patient is still on the bed. She's barely breathing, and the tears are falling. And then she hears it again. But the crying is not coming from the bed, it's from behind her. And that's when she slowly turns around and she realizes that arm wire is open, wide open, and she knows she did not leave it open. And inside the darkness, she can see something moving. And then, as she watches, she sees an arm, long and thin, reaching out. And it comes through, almost like it's coming through the mirror, not the opening of the door. It slowly drags across the floor, pulling itself into the room. She says she is shook. She can't move. She can't breathe. And the second that hand crosses the threshold of the arm wire, the patient stops breathing. No sound at all. And the crying, it stops immediately. The room goes still, and the arm slides slowly back in, just like it came out. Like it was never there. And the arm wire door just creaks slowly shut. She said she didn't touch a thing. She hurried up and got up out of that room. And she said at that point she knew she would never pick up another home health case again. But this was the final nail in the coffin, because as she walked down that hallway past that portrait one last time, she looked at it and she said that the eyes weren't following her this time. The woman in the portrait was gone. So you tell me, if that woman's not in the portrait anymore, where is she? And if you enjoyed this short story time, make sure you're following me for more as I try to post daily. And have your best spooky day. Bye.
My ex was part of the cult of the Wendigo, and I made it out safely, though I'm not sure that other women did. This story was submitted by someone who wanted to be called Jane, and it is highly alarming. There are certain elements of the story that are disturbing. It's definitely the creepiest one that I've gotten dealing with dating a real person in quite some time. Crimes may have been committed, but as far as going to the police about these crimes, Jane says she has no concrete proof, and she has gone to the police about certain aspects, though not much can be done. Considering that the women that this story involves were adults, many of whom were part of marginalized communities or who had warrants out, and so the police think that they may have left by their own accord. But buckle in for this story, it is a crazy one. Last year, Jane got on a dating app and she immediately matched with a man named Charles. And they talked for a few weeks and had plans to meet, but she ultimately canceled those plans for one reason or another. And Charles got mad, so they stopped talking for a while. But eventually he reached back out and he says, hey, I would still really love to meet you. And Jane had nothing going on, so she was like, sure, let's do it. Talked for about another month before they did end up meeting up, so Jane felt like she had a good sense of who this person was, and he didn't put up any immediate red flags. But when they finally met up, she said that the chemistry was good, but he started saying like very strange things off the bat. One of the first stories that he told her was basically about how he had a psychic effect on women and how his ex-girlfriend had drawn pictures of him years before they had met. And he also told Jane a story about how he had fallen 40 feet but walked away unscathed. Told her, this actually happened a lot in my life. I've had many brushes with death. Charles was middle-aged but looked about 20 years younger, despite the fact that when they started dating, Jane realized that he was a heavy drinker. He would finish a handle of vodka every couple days. Despite this, he never showed any signs of abusing alcohol. And actually, one night, soon after they started dating, Jane actually had to take him to the ER because he was experiencing withdrawal symptoms from not drinking that day. And when they admitted him, the nurses and Jane were shocked because his blood work, his liver panel, every other test they ran came back completely normal. Despite his struggles with alcohol, Jane continued dating him because he was charismatic, he was charming, and there were aspects of his personality that she enjoyed, but she did notice other strange habits that he had. Like everything he ate was dripping in fat. She said, "I've never seen someone eat so much fat and stay so lean, but I figured it was his metabolism." He also kept his house overwhelmingly hot. Heat was kicked up into the 80s, and he would complain about the slightest draft if she left a door or window open. Stranger still, he had collections of things that didn't belong to him all over his house, like a large box of dog toys, even though he didn't own a dog, or a box of makeup, or a set of women's clothing. And when she asked about them, he would always say, "Oh, that's so-and-so's," or "Oh, that's my ex-girlfriend's. People are always leaving things here and they never come back to get them." And she says, "Well, why don't you get rid of them?" And he said, "I will eventually," but he never did. Charles's house was in the middle of nowhere on a large parcel of property that he owned. And on this property, he had a friend that was camping, and this person was living in a camper, and his name was Sam. Jane was aware that Sam stayed on the property, but often at night when she would spend the night, she would hear other voices and conversations happening what sounded like just right outside the door. But when she asked Charles about it, he would say, "Ooh, I don't know, maybe there's someone there," and sort of play into it like he was trying to scare her. And despite the fact that he had many cameras all over his property, they never picked up anything strange. One night, though, when she was staying over, Sam came running up from his camper to the house on the property, and he was complaining and yelling about seeing a large, tall, elk-like creature that stood on two legs, stood among the trees and stared at him. Charles laughed at this, and Jane said, "Well, did you take a picture?" And he said, "No, I didn't. I was too scared and I ran here instead." I assumed he was just imagining things in the dark and didn't put much more thought into it. As their relationship progressed, Jane noticed that Charles had more bad habits that she hadn't picked up on at first. He was insatiable with everything he did, with women, with gambling, with substances, with drinking, with food. Often let his ego drive when he was drinking, and he would say very strange things to her that seemed almost like he was self-inflating, and got more specific. He would say things like, "I'm so charismatic I could start a cult if I wanted. You have no idea what I truly am." He said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I'm a god of sorts, but not a god. You would never guess what I'm talking about." He said, "All you need to know about it is that I'm more powerful than you would ever guess, both energetically and spiritually." When she pressed him for more details, he laughed it off like it was a joke. As Jane started picking up on the darker aspects of Charles's personality, he started asking her if she would be open to bringing in another woman into the relationship to engage in adult activities with them. Jane said she was not necessarily opposed, and initially they met up with a woman named Brenda, but ultimately decided not to go through with what they planned, though she and Brenda stayed friends. Next, they met a woman named Suzanne, who they did engage with physically. Afterward, Jane found out that Charles had told Suzanne that he and Suzanne were in an exclusive relationship and that Jane was the third person. He had told both women completely different stories, but after a lot of back and forth, Jane ultimately decided to forgive him and stay with him. She also stayed friends with Suzanne. And then there was Tiffany, who was supposedly just one of Charles's friends and who he had told her was dating a neighbor up the road. Anytime Tiffany would text Charles, he would get very secretive with his phone and put it away or not want to talk to Tiffany in front of her. And anytime Tiffany came over, Jane said that she just felt very bad energy coming off of her. And she actually felt scared of her because for some reason, she just seemed like the female version of Charles. As these other women kept popping up, Jane grew increasingly frustrated with Charles, catching him in lies constantly, and she no longer trusted him. And so the relationship deteriorated. And as it did, she became closer with Suzanne and Brenda, who helped paint a fuller picture. Meanwhile, Charles complained that Jane didn't fully understand him and that she didn't understand his sense of humor. But as she listened closer, what he joked about became chilling. When they would fight, he would say things like, "You wouldn't be anything without me. You're the type of woman to come out here into the middle of the woods to my property, and you have no idea what I've done to women. How easy it would be for me to harm and you." And he would laugh and say he was just kidding. Jane said another alarming thing that he mentioned to her when she was still dating him was one night when she was over there, he pointed out to a space on his property that used to house a camper, and the camper was gone. And he said, "You didn't even ask me what happened to my camper, but I moved it to another property, and there's no telling who's in it or what's being done to them right now." Soon after this weird comment about the camper, Jane found out that Charles had been cheating on her, and she caught him in a lie, and he gaslit her about it, and after 2 days of fighting, she finally ended it for good. After the breakup, she leaned more on Suzanne and Brenda for support because they had remained friends. And Brenda admitted that she was also terrified of Charles because one day, shortly after they had met, he had asked her to come over and help him clean out an outbuilding on his property. And when she went out to the property, he told her that all they were going to be doing was moving some trash bags into his truck and taking it to a landfill. When she walked into the outbuilding, she was met with a sight that looked something out of a movie. The room was filled with saws, and as she approached the bag, she noticed a gruesome smell coming from it. She said, "I have no idea what was in that bag. I had to stop what I was doing and throw up." Ultimately declined helping him, and he said, "Why? What do you think's in there? Something rotting, like a body?" He had assumed that it was a byproduct of something that Charles had caught while hunting, though he never explained. But after she got home, he sent her a string of messages telling her that he couldn't wait to get her into his camper, that he had all kinds of surprises planned for her. She didn't respond. When Brenda told Jane this story, a light bulb clicked in Jane's head because she remembered a time that she had been pulling meat out of a deep freezer at Charles's house, and he had told her it was elk, but the color was too pale. And she says, "I've grown up eating elk. I know what color it's supposed to be." It resembled pork, but she accidentally left some out on the counter, and Charles was extremely angry about this. But instead of throwing away the meat that had been left out immediately, he left it sit on the counter for a few days. When she told him that she would throw it out, he told her not to touch it and that he would take care of it. A few weeks after she and Charles broke up for good, he started messaging her, telling her that he was sorry and that he missed her. But she told him, "Absolutely not. I'm putting my foot down. We are not getting back together." And within 7 days of her telling him that, both Suzanne and Brenda disappeared. Suzanne supposedly reconnected with an ex-boyfriend who Charles also knew. But right before she disappeared for good, Jane received a strange text from Suzanne's phone asking Jane if she needed any substances. Jane said no, but the day before that text was sent was the last time that Suzanne was active on any of her social media platforms. Brenda was last heard from a few days after that. And after both of these women stopped responding and stopped checking their social media, Jane went to the police. She had already checked to make sure that they weren't in jail or a hospital, but when she went to the police, she was assured that if they still didn't resurface in a reasonable amount of time, they would double check. But Jane says that both women had legal issues, which she didn't disclose. But she says that people assume that they went into hiding because of those issues, even though those issues are unrelated, and both women used to be active on social media every single day. Soon after that, Jane found out that Sam, the man who lived on Charles's property, his friend, also went missing. He was sort of a transient figure anyway, though, so nobody really worried too much about it. Everyone in the town assumed he had just moved on. But the more Jane thought about everything, the more uneasy she felt. And she thought about the last conversation she had with Brenda the night before she went missing. They were talking about Wendigos, and Brenda and her were discussing the Wendigos' need to stay close to a source of heat, to feed off of fat, practice cannibalism. And Brenda started digging, and they found themselves down the rabbit hole and into a description of the cult of Wendigos. She says they realized is a society of sorcerers. People then became this type of sorcerer by breaking certain cultural taboos. I can't go into too much detail here, but I'm sure you could find it if you look hard enough. Jane says ultimately she's glad that she made it out and that she has not been contacted by Charles since the weekend that Brenda disappeared. Still, though, she's not convinced that the final message from Suzanne was not her ex pretending to be her. But she says, "I'm telling you that there was something else going on that property beyond just addiction and dysfunction. That I'm grateful I got out with my life, though I'm not sure that Brenda and Suzanne were so lucky. If they weren't, I want to make sure that I tell their story." Even though they were part of communities that may be overlooked, people who struggle with crime or with addiction or with certain histories, they also deserve to be remembered. The names in this story have been changed, and I've left out any detail that could possibly identify where he lives because she said she is still worried that he could find her. Please be kind. She will be seeing the comments. If you have a story you think no one would believe, that leaves you feeling unsettled, or that you feel like you can't share with anyone else and you want feedback from a largely non-judgmental community, feel free to send it in. We would love to hear it, and I do my best to tell these stories in a respectful way.
Welcome back to After Midnight Stories, where it's too late to be logical, but too early to pretend everything's fine. I believe you here. We all believe you. Now I hope you're all tucked into bed, because this story's gonna stick with you. My boyfriend has been terrified of me ever since we got back from the Appalachian Trail. Dane and I have been together for 4 years. We're the kind of couple that has a whole private language. Inside jokes, shorthand. I know him better than I know anyone. So when I tell you something is wrong with him, I need you to understand that I'm not being paranoid. The hike was his idea, about 200 miles, 3 weeks, starting in Virginia. He'd always wanted to do a long stretch. The week before we left, he could barely sleep. He was so excited. The first 2 weeks were incredible, hard, but incredible. We hike until late afternoon, set up camp, cook whatever dehydrated thing we'd packed, and lie on top of our sleeping bags, just talking until one of us fell asleep mid-sentence. I felt closer to him out there than I ever had. It was the 3rd week when things started to feel off. I don't know how to explain it except the woods changed. Not visibly, same trail, same trees, but the air felt different, thicker, like the atmosphere had shifted by a degree you couldn't measure, but could tell in your chest. Dane felt it too. He got quieter. He'd always been the one pointing things out. Look at that ridge, look at that bird, but he just stopped. Eyes forward, jaw set. On the 4th night of the week, I woke up and he wasn't in the tent. I found him standing about 20 feet at the tree line, just standing there, looking into the dark. I called his name and he turned around so fast it startled me. He looked not scared exactly, more like he'd been caught doing something. He said he needed to use the bathroom. We went back to the tent. He didn't sleep. I could feel him lying awake next to me the entire rest of the night. We finished the hike and drove home. I thought once we were back in our apartment, our routines, he'd return to himself. He hasn't. He flinches when I touch him, not every time, but enough that I've started hesitating before I reach for him. Last week, I came up behind him while he was doing dishes and put my hand on his shoulder and he made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. And stepped away. He apologized immediately, said he was jumpy, and blamed it on bad sleep. He started locking the bedroom door at night. We share a bedroom. We share a bed. For the past 6 days, I've been waking up on the couch with no memory of getting there. And the bedroom door locked from the inside. And Dane on the other side claiming he has no idea how I ended up in the living room. He says I must be sleepwalking. He says it gently, the way you say things to someone you're frightened of. I asked him to just tell me what was wrong. Sat across from him at the kitchen table and asked him to look me in the eye and tell me what I had done. He looked at me for a long time, his jaw worked. I watched him decide something. He said, "You haven't done anything. I've just been in my head since the trail. I'm sorry." He squeezed my hand and let go after less than a second. I went to the bathroom after dinner, stood at the sink, splashed water on my face. When I looked up, I was smiling. I hadn't smiled. I wasn't smiling. But my reflection was, just for a second. Just long enough for me to see it wearing an expression I hadn't put there. Wide, still, patient. Then it was just my face again. I told myself it was lighting or the water in my eyes. A few days later, I finally got him to really talk. I waited until Sunday morning. Good light, coffee, noise from the street outside. I needed us to feel like a regular people in a regular place. I said, "Tell me what you saw on that trail." He looked at his mug for a long time. Then he said, "I saw you." I didn't understand. We were both on the trail. Of course he saw me. He shook his head. "The last 2 nights, after you were asleep, you were outside, standing at the edge of the tree line, same spot both nights. Just standing there, looking in." I told him that was impossible. I told him it must have been sleepwalking, stress, 3 weeks in the woods. He said, "You weren't asleep. Your eyes were open. I called your name and you turned around." He stopped. I asked him, "What did I look like when I turned around?" He picked up his coffee mug with both hands and said very quietly, "You were smiling." I started setting my phone to record audio at night, told myself it was to check for sleepwalking. Last night, there were 4 hours of silence, and then at 2:14 a.m., the bedroom door opening, footsteps, the front door silence for a long time. Then footsteps back, the bedroom door again, and when I woke up, I was in bed. I felt fine, rested, almost good. There was a single small leaf on the pillow next to me. Dried, brown edged, something from late fall, even though it's spring. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why my first instinct wasn't to be frightened. My first instinct was to put it in my pocket. I didn't. I threw it in the trash. I stood at the bathroom sink and looked very hard at my own reflection and waited to see what my face would do. It just looked back at me. Tired, scared. But I waited a long time before I was sure. I don't know what I'm becoming, or if becoming is even the right word. Maybe it's more like revealing. Like something that was always in the woods found a door, and the door was me. I don't know if the thing is only at the tree line now, or if it's at the table eating breakfast, writing this, generating all of this fear as some kind of performance to seem normal. I don't know how to know. My sister called and said I sounded far away, like the bad kind of far away. Dane is still here. He hasn't left. I don't think he can bring himself to. He slept on the couch last night by choice. I laid in our bed alone and looked at the ceiling and thought about the woods, the smell, and the dark. And when I woke up, I was hungry in a way that I'd never been before. A way I don't have words for. I don't know what I'm asking. I just needed someone else to know. If I sound different the next update, please say something. I mean that.
Also written in the 1898 book, The Reverend Morgan Jones and the Welsh Indians of Virginia, it is claimed that Reverend Jones was making his way through the wilderness of America in 1669 when he and his fellow travelers were captured by natives. He claims that he was saved by a tribe of natives, the Doeg, and it was because he spoke Welsh. He was begging for his life when a Doeg chief approached him and, speaking in Morgan's own language, told him, "You shall not die today."
Interesting.
And the language didn't resemble a lot of the other, like, Algonquian languages that the other tribes that they had interacted with. It sounded very much like Welsh.
Like Welsh.
Yes. And some people say that there were some words that were, like, kind of similar, and the language is dead now. Like, we don't know if that language actually even existed, who spoke it. They don't speak it anymore, if they're still around. I mean, obviously, a lot of tribes were basically killed off by disease and encroachment and,
horrible
theft
things.
and war.
Horrible
But
things.
so that could be why, but interesting either way to hear these accounts. Even more interesting, it's said that Thomas Jefferson believed that these Welsh Indians, quote unquote, may have still existed at the time of the Louisiana Purchase. He asked Lewis and Clark to search for native tribes that spoke a language similar to Welsh. He gave them the task. He was like, "Hey, if you find the Welsh Indians down south, let me know." As you can imagine, they never came across such people. And if the stories of the Moon-Eyed people being in the mountains before the Cherokee arrived are to be believed, then it doesn't really make sense that Maddox or his people could be them anyway. Because the Cherokee arrived in the area of North Carolina, Georgia, around 1000 AD, I think. And Maddox wouldn't have been there until like over 100 years later. Or nearly 200 years later. So the timeline doesn't really add up.
Yeah.
If the Cherokee are to be believed that they were there before them, which, why would they say, not like, why would they say that if it wasn't true?
I have so many thoughts.
Lay them out. Let's hear.
No, just, I want to hear, because do you have any, are there recent stories that you're about to tell us?
No, but sort of.
Or more recent things that people say?
No, but sort of.
Okay.
So, I have nothing about, exactly Moon-Eyed people, but theories on what Moon-Eyed people could be and theories that they might still exist. So,
okay.
So
I'll
nothing
save it.
really.
I'll save it, because
Okay.
I don't know. My wheels are turning.
Okay. So it may be that the white settlers had a vested interest in claims that there were white people living on the land long before the Spanish arrived, like I said.
And I would believe that, for sure.
100%. Yeah. And that could be the source of many of the bits and pieces added into the legend of the Moon-Eyed people that may not actually belong. So that's why I said the legend kind of gets murky, because when you have written accounts by these white settlers coming in, and some of them say, well, a Cherokee told a friend of a friend who told me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's more like, oh, we had this intermediary who, he knew a guy. is our earlier accounts of these legends.
I knew a guy who knew a guy.
Yes, and it could have been, as I said, like expedient for them to be like, oh, and you know what they said? They said white people were here first.
Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows? It's also believed that some legends were kind of combined together. Like they would hear a legend of the Moon-Eyed people, but then they also hear a legend of something similar but not quite the same, and they blend them together and they're like, oh, they must be talking about the same thing.
But that's with everything.
Lost in translation kind of thing. It's possible that the Moon-Eyed people were simply another tribe of natives, like the mound builders of Cahokia, or some scholars suggest descendants of the Adena culture, who are said to have existed from 500 BC to 200 AD in the early woodland period. Proponents of this theory claim that they may have been called moon-eyed originally because they watched the night sky as their calendar. So
okay.
Maybe that's the reason. It wasn't actually that they were only frolicking at night.
Bro.
They used the nighttime to tell time.
Speaking of like calendars and things, have you seen like turtles' shells being linked back to time and stuff like that?
No, that's crazy. I thought you were going into the Mayan calendar and how
No.
everyone thought the world was ending in 2012.
That also was something y'all should have never told me in 2012 because I was what, 13?
Yeah.
December 2012, 13? Yeah. I was horrified. Low
It was a
key.
little scary.
But anyway, no.
You know what's funny?
You need to look into that though.
December
We'll talk
2012,
about-
I got my first boyfriend ever, and I was like, of course, the world
Oh, I
must end
remember
now.
that. I remember that.
It's really funny. Anyway, sorry, what?
No, we need to
Turtles?
discuss the turtles and their shells and just time. I don't know. There's a lot.
Linked
a lot.
to like a certain tribe or
I don't know exactly. I think I sent it to you. We'll discuss later.
Okay.
But
We'll
if
add
y'all
it
know
to
what
the
I'm
list.
talking about, you know.
Let me know. Regardless of who exactly they were, there are stories passed down through several different tribes that a war was waged with them long ago. Under the light of a full moon, the Creek attacked the little moon-eyed people who couldn't see as well in the bright light. They drove them from their caves and are said to have gotten rid of the people in the area. Accounts vary as to whether they moved west or integrated into other surrounding tribes, like the surviving people who survived the war, kind of. I think this also happened with many other tribes across the Americas. They would come in and like war, and one obviously would be victorious, and the surviving people would just kind of, be taken in.
Yeah.
But Cherokee also had clashes with these beings in their legends. In John Haywood's 1823 book, The Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee, Haywood claims that Cherokee leaders told him of a great war that ended in a treaty for the people to leave and never return. So now we're getting more into books that were firsthand accounts, like Native Chief told me, or, Elder told me this story, this legend that they've been passing down. James Mooney's later book told stories of oral histories passed down to members of the Cherokee Nation of a race of very small, perfectly white people who lived in the region for quite some time before they arrived. Now, perfectly white meaning not peachy white, not just skin color white.
The color white.
Like peaty white.
Yeah.
Some accounts claim that these little people were very powerful even.
For anybody that's not watching, she's talking about the dog, Petey, that's laying
Oh,
here, by
yes,
the way. If
sorry.
you're new, this is Petey.
So sorry. Yes,
Hello.
I should not assume that everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about all the time. The consistency is notable, particularly in the later books, whose primary sources are the Cherokee people themselves, as I said, rather than Europeans who are acting as intermediaries between the settlers and the natives. So I read one account, and I don't remember what book or who said it exactly, but they used the word magician.
Okay.
So powerful people, magician, magic. I don't know if that means they could actually do magic, like they were, making things disappear right before your eyes kind of thing, or if it was, some other thing descriptive as magic, as magician.
Okay, I need to talk about something that I feel doesn't get enough attention, and then I'm going to tell you a story that made my skin crawl. We hear tons about Bigfoot and other cryptids, but there's something else that's been reported all across the United States for generations. I've actually done 2 other stories on it, and when I did them at the time, I had no idea that this thing existed, or what it even was. This creature I'm talking about is Dogman. And while Bigfoot does get most of the attention, Dogman has been quietly accumulating some of its own. It's seen in rural woods and deep woods and heavily in the hills of West Virginia. People who have come across Dogman describe it pretty consistently. Massive, muscular, bipedal, and covered in dark fur. A long snout and tall pointed ears. And the ability to drop from 2 legs to 4 to make great strides and leaps. It's like it exists somewhere between animal and something else entirely. Researchers have been documenting these things for decades, and the people who report them aren't necessarily seemingly looking for attention. They're hunters or truck drivers or regular people driving home late at night. They see something they can never fully explain, and they spend years trying to convince themselves that it was something else entirely. This story comes from someone who did exactly that for a decade. I came across this story recently and I cannot stop thinking about it, so I had to share it with you. This story takes place on Route 7 in West Virginia. It was a long, dark stretch, specifically in Wetzel County. Not much out there for miles, just steep hills and deep woods. It was well after midnight, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. This person was coming around one of the sharp turns near a little town called 100 when they saw something walking right along the white line to the right. In the dim glow of the headlights at first, it was just this massive dark shape. Side note, they had recently hit a deer and it was $1,500 in repairs, so they slowed way down and they straddled the yellow line, giving whatever this thing was plenty of space. Okay, as they pulled alongside, they looked out the passenger window. This thing's head and shoulders were towering above the car window. Even hunched over, it was enormous. They described it as having a long snout and very long pointed ears. And their exhausted brain tried to rationalize what they were seeing. At first, they remember thinking, wow, that's a really big dog. But they kept driving, too shocked to process. It wasn't until miles down the road, they said, that the logic caught up to fear, thinking, dogs don't get that big. Not even the largest breed would not be towering over a vehicle like that, nor would they be on 2 legs. So, trying to rationalize it now, they told themselves, yeah, it was a bear. Had to be a bear. A really weird, thin, muscular bear. And they held on to that lie because the alternative was too much to comprehend. But they said the image of that dog-like face wouldn't get out of their head. So for 10 years, they held on to this thought. They said they'd always get a little prickle of fear anytime they were driving along that route late at night. They said they never told anybody about it at first. They would just dread driving down Route 7 at night. Okay, so fast forward now to the fall of 2021. They found themselves driving down that same stretch of road near Mannington. It was the second week of November, late at night between 10 and 11 p.m. They said that night it was thick with a heavy rolling fog, so thick that even the brightest headlights didn't seem to put a dent into it. When all of a sudden, something vaulted up over the guardrail right in front of them. It was so fast, at first it disappeared into the mist, but then it reappeared as it was crossing over the yellow line. They said that rather than sort of running quickly across, this thing cleared the area in one quick fluid motion. And yeah, it was walking on 2 legs. So they slow way down and they're like white knuckling the steering wheel, praying that there are not more of them following in the shadows behind it. They said it was at least 7 feet tall and dark, almost as if it were a really big human being wearing a dark hoodie. And then that human illusion shattered as it dropped to all fours, almost in like a predatory crouch. And then it turned its head back and looked directly at them. And they confirmed it was the same creature they saw 10 years ago.
So listen to me.
Long snout, tall pointed ears, very canine-like. Before they could even fully process it, they said this thing launched itself up and over a 6-foot embankment, and it disappeared into the thick forest. They had no words for what they saw. So not long after the encounter, they did attend a seminar in Fairmount, West Virginia. There was an investigator there named Les Odell, and he spoke a lot about the Dogman that lives in northern West Virginia. He described bipedal canine-like creatures, not quite wolf and not quite human, and that they've been reported throughout these hills for generations. He said, they're not just animals. They're something ancient, something that seems to understand the roads and the people that travel them. And every hair on the back of their neck stood up listening to this guy, because they knew without a shadow of a doubt that that's exactly what they saw 2 different times. All right, who's from West Virginia? Who has had Dogman encounters? I want to hear all the stories. Feel free to email them to me. The info is in my bio. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Also, there's been some discrepancy with the differences between Dogman and what a werewolf is. So if anybody wants to help clarify that in the comments, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you are new here, you gotta follow for more creepy story time.
A little bit of a creepy story time for you. We have a natural spring that runs directly next to our house. I live in Appalachia. The spring has willow trees growing out of it. The willow trees have kind of fallen years prior, and so they've grown at twisted and odd angles. And it always gives me vibes. So one day, I find a marble in our yard, and I think, oh, I'm gonna go leave it over there as an offering of sorts to any potential fae. That was about a month back, and I've checked it periodically to see where it is, and it's always in the same spot. But this week I moved it. So on my mental health walk outside today, I pass that area. I stay for a bit enjoying the greenery, and then I kind of move along walking throughout the rest of my yard. And then I put on the Spirit Talker app and sit on my porch for a bit. I do this from time to time because I have ghosts who live in my house. It's an old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, sometimes they like having someone to talk to. And I'm always very careful with who I interact with, my protections, everything. So I'm sitting out in the silence enjoying the weather, and the word marble popped up. And I'm immediately shooketh. They then send, "Don't rush away," referring to how I didn't stay very long earlier when I had walked by. Already alarm bells are going on inside of me. I then ask, "Do you want me to come back over there?" And the immediate response I get is absolutely. My deity is saying no, 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 over and over again. And my other deities are saying tricks. I already knew this. So I say, "I'm pretty sure you just want to play a game." And the immediate response is, "Certainly." I ask for more protection, and I kind of say, "Well, I'm onto you. I know what you're doing. I'm not going over there, but nice try." And the conversation kind of ended there. I talked to some other people, but yeah, they moved on real quick. And I swear I have seen something in the tree before. I swear I have seen a humanoid-like thing that looked like bark hiding in the tree. So yeah, won't be leaving things over there anymore.
My dad waved at me through the window, but he wasn't home. So this happened back when I was still living at home, and I got home from school early, and I remember walking up to my house, and I was looking through the front window, and I saw my dad. He was just looking out the front window. He made eye contact with me, and he just waved. It was kind of a weird wave, like there wasn't a smile or anything with it, but I just waved back, and then I was gonna go walk into my house. The second I walked into my house, something felt very off in the air. It was very quiet. I yelled out, "Dad," and nobody responded. I went and I checked the living room. It was empty. This made no sense because I know that I just saw my dad through the window. I checked my kitchen, empty. I checked my bedroom, empty. His bedroom, empty. And then I realized that his car isn't even in the driveway. This made absolutely no sense, so I called my dad on the phone, and he picked up pretty immediately, and I said, "Hey, like, where are you?" And he said, "I've been at work." And I'm like, "You haven't been home at all?" He said, "No, I haven't come home at all today. I left this morning and I haven't been back." I didn't tell him what I saw. I just hung up. And then later on in the day, he came back home in the evening. And I hadn't checked the rest of the house after that point. I don't know. I tried to let it go. Anyway, so he came back home in the evening. And I was like, "Are you sure you didn't come home for lunch or anything?" And he said, "No, I have not been back at the house." So he just summed it up as like, "I don't know, maybe you saw something else. Maybe it was your imagination." And
So I sat there thinking I was crazy until a few days later happened, and I was in my living room, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something in my hallway, and it was the same height as my dad, same shape as my dad, and it was standing there just watching me. Eventually, it moved back into the hallway like it wasn't trying to be seen. I never saw it again after that, but to this day, I still close my curtains before it gets dark at night because I sit and wonder about whatever I saw in the window that first day and how it was already inside of my house.
So I had no idea how common it was to actually see supernatural beings during car wrecks, but so many of you guys had crazy stories. It reminds me of this story from 9/11 about the last guy that made it out of the South Tower who was led out by a person that wasn't there. But before we get into it, if you're interested in these kinds of stories, I just did a whole podcast episode about them. So Ron DeFrancesco was on the 84th floor of the South Tower, right in this area on 9/11. He survived the impact, but he runs to a stairwell because he knows he has to get out of the building. But when he opens up the stairwell, people are running up, not down. So he starts going up, but he gets a feeling that they're not going to make it out if they go up. So around floor 91, he turns around and he starts heading down. But in the stairwell, there's smoke and debris and fire everywhere. And also there's just people passed out all around him. So he thinks he's about to die when all of a sudden he hears this voice go, "Get up, keep going." He kind of thinks at first it's a fireman, but no rescue teams had made it up that high just yet. So he gets up and he starts going down, and this voice is pointing out where the debris and the fire is, making sure that he's safe the whole way. And then once he's in the clear, it just disappears. Ron was the last person to make it out of the tower, and he fully credits this supernatural being.